Yeah.
Sorry. Just
like
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Books That Matter. My name is Priska Aroko. Today we're talking about Africa and her people. Who is credible enough to write stories about Africa? So, yes, no, not yes or no, that's not a yes or no question. Who should be writing about Africa? Like, who's credible enough to write about Africa?
Well, that's a wide question.
But you have an opinion on that.
Of course. Okay, fine. I think you also have to understand a lot about Africa in the sense of what we as Africans have gone through, what we've been subjected to, and up to where we are.
Mm-hmm.
How even when guys speak about China and neo-colonialism and such things, I think the African for so long has been treated like second class, that even our stories are not told by us. Like it then makes sense for someone to come to Kibera from, say, the US or Europe and feel like because they've spent a month there, they have an opinion on Kibera and should share their opinion. Because it comes along as savior-ish. I think we should tell our own stories. I think it's better when it comes from us. When you read something from Chinua Achebe, Sembene, Osman, you feel it because it's coming from someone who's experienced that from birth. You don't feel it like, it's not like me going to France and telling the French about Napoleon.
Actually, that book will never sell because they'll be like, on what
authority? Yes, they won't. First of all, yes, authority. Second of all, maybe some feelings of racism. They're like, how is an African here coming here to tell us about Napoleon, and then talking about Paris, no.
Well, I think we do not have rules that actually govern on who should write about Africa, so that gives everyone the right to actually write about Africa. But again, it's absolute injustice to then have someone write from a place of ignorance than from a place of knowledge. I do think that, a story is only as good as the storyteller, and the best storytellers actually rule the world. The reason as to why, the Western Hemisphere is actually, at the helm of power is because the story has been told right, while we actually probably could second in or third in, because then we have been blacked out of history, of our past. But someone is only as powerful as the story told about them.
Okay.
And hence the reason I kind of feel like, Africa is actually handicapped, has been handicapped and is continually being handicapped by the stories that are being told by second-hand African citizens. And I also do think that it's not a fault of the storytellers are doing, but I do think that they're coming in because nobody's actually picking up the space, occupying the space that is in that regard. Africans are actually reluctant to actually step out and tell their own story.
They say that until the lion learns to write the story about hunting will favor the hunter. And in that regard, I say whoever sponsors the writer has an influence in what is being written. It will always favor the sponsor. So look at Africa as a people. We've been enslaved. Our names have been taken off us, our language, our morals. Then as we struggle to try and seek a platform where we can tell our story, then the oppressor is the one who comes and creates a platform. And when we reach the microphone to speak to the world about our story, then he steps on the side and says, you are too weak, you are illiterate, you are barbaric, you cannot tell your story. Let me be in position to tell your story. And that's what happens. A good example is one of the books by Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Decolonizing the Mind. In a certain section, she talks about Karen Blixen, the way Karen Blixen perceived Africans and what she did to Africans. So that was the hunter telling the story. But through Ngugi wa Thiong'o, we've been able to at least tell our own story in perspective and on the same platform with the Karen Blixen. Yeah.
Do you think the African story is being told appropriately? Yes or no?
Appropriately, it's very, like, relative in nature.
All right, now according to you, what do you think?
Well, I kind of think the problem actually, starts with, of course, we have the indigenous Africans. But again, we have the satellite members in different, continents who've been, let me say remotely raised or something of the kind. But I wouldn't actually, blame them, for trying to write about Africa, because, that could be the process by which then they get to trace their roots. My problem would actually, lie, or probably, I would actually lay the blame on, the indigenous Africans, people who actually know what it actually means in its very authentic sense to be, an African, who've gone through, what a normal African would actually go through, and the media itself. Because then the African story is actually being told through the Western lenses. You end up, having, adulterated stories and all that stuff. So I do think that then, if you're looking at, probably now across demographics, we would probably think of, the young people being in the best of positions and given, their grasp on technology, in the best position to then, take that up. But, the generation that's gone, the older guys, I would say then we would choose specifics. I'd love to hear, the African story come off the mouths of Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, the lives that actually stood for something. But then, the kind that we actually currently have are people who are trying to fend for their families, so that takes priority.
Okay, what do you think?
They are writing very good stories.
Factual?
Sorry?
Factual?
Yeah, they are factual. A story like Takayo by Grace of God, it impacts on a rape within the older generation who are trusted to take out the younger ones. Then they become the ones molesting the younger ones. It's a very articulated story, such that if you don't have a clear conscience, you won't understand what she's talking about. And if we talk about Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart, a man of the people. A man of the people is playing in our lives right now. And there are very factual stories, and the things that happen or are going to happen to us. For you to write about people, you must somehow assimilate with them. Then you understand their way of life.
But there are people who've actually lived that, they've lived with you, they've even left what they know and assimilated into that culture.
Yeah, it is said that person who started slavery, Henry, I've forgotten the name, but he stayed in Africa for about 20 years, studying the way Africans who behaved, the perceived strangers, and his outcome was not to benefit the Africans, rather than to look at their weak point so that he may enslave them. So people who come to live with us, maybe in most cases, they don't have a good intent with us.
Well, it depends. I think in the modern context, not necessarily. If you go back to writers like Grace of God, Chinua Achebe, and the likes, these ones came from an old school time. They came from that either pre or post colonial time, and there was still the moral fiber of society was still heavily imbued, But today, so when they were writing, actually, they were writing to try and guide society. So even what they spoke about, if you read books like A Man of the People, it's about it's about corruption, which is relevant even today, but it's about trying to guide society. But today's books are being written not about guiding people, but more towards trying to make a profit.
Okay.
So if you're trying to make a profit, the honesty of the story is lost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh well, I allow me to like probably like take a different trajectory in regard to stories, because one thing for one, and I don't want to sound like I'm actually the moral police, like in regard to like trying to guide on who should write about Africa or not. But again, like good stories. I should acknowledge that good stories are actually written by Africans and by like a whole horde of people. But we find that like the system is actually created in such a way that these stories then bump into a sieve. So a sieving system that again allows specific stories that tell of a certain agenda, that probably promote a certain agenda. And those are the stories that go through, and of course the bureaucracy that's within the literature or just the literal system. But stories cannot just be told via writing. There's a story behind everything. I think there's a lot that's actually said behind the alphabets, like there's between the lines, between the alphabets and what the alphabets do say themselves. I mean there's a story behind my face. Like there is what that says without me, without a single utterance. So the African story is not just something that can be limited to words, that can be limited to a certain sort of writing or whatever. It's a story that I do think is actually being told even when it's not being told, because even a story not being told is a story in itself.
We have seen different authors use fiction in writing African stories. Is it a credible way to tell the African story? Because for someone who doesn't read fiction, this person may not read this thing with the authority that it deserves to be given, or the level of respect that this book needs to be given.
If you ask me, it's stuck. Like I did Among the People 12 years ago. I remember almost every detail about it. And
But
that's fiction.
if you hadn't done the book in high school, would you have picked an enemy of the people or a man of the people?
I don't know. I honestly can't tell you that, because every experience that you go through in life is shaped by something else. So I'm happy that they were technically forced on us, because it piqued my interest. And then when I did from 5 and 6, boom, I also got some more books, so it's relative. Yeah.
Still?
Well, I do think that then writing shouldn't be restricted to a specific style of writing, because again just like we
But then you're telling the African, you're telling a real story.
Yeah.
This is something that is happening, this is something that has happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you see different styles get to different people. There is someone who only gets things from the fictional perspective of things. Understands things better from if you use the fictional characters. And then there's someone who wants the story raw, So for me, the diversity that comes with the style doesn't really matter, and if anything, it actually enriches the society. So whether through poetry, whether through whatever. And one of the people that I have a friend who writes, and that friend her name is she's called Shingai. Shingai is an amazing writer, African writer.
And you just lit up with it.
Yeah, she is, and the manner in which she tells the African story through spoken word and through her writings, and really gets to me and a few other people within that cohort. And that might not actually be the same thing that actually oozes out of other people when they bump into such styles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think fiction is credible or not when telling the African story?
Fiction is credible because it's a safer way to hide some of the reality, and we can look, since we put a man of the people mentioned. Look, a man of the people is a very violent book, and we can see that it was done as a subject in our secondary schools for a period of close to 4 years. After that, we had post-election violence. So some people have attributed to people having reason to rebellion after reading A Man of the People. So it's credible to attack the society. And again, nowadays people, writers have gone more on screenwriting. So, and if you compare the current situation in Kenya, the Okoth, Ken Okoth, may he rest in peace, the saga, Two Wives, Not Known, and we compare with the
But we only know one way.
no,
That we know.
yeah. So if we compare with the program that runs in one of the local TV station, My Two Wives, so you find that
Interesting story.
yeah, they try to tell the same story. So it's a good way of hiding the truth, but still.
Are we in Africa in a point where we are ready for that kind of writing?
The problem is the risk associated.
Everyone takes risks, whether you're
True.
writing
But you see, the difference is this: unless you're leaking, like in the US, unless you're leaking American secrets, like say, what's the WikiLeaks do, like say Assange or the other guy, that are now national security things. Do you? No one really cares. No one's coming after you because you've criticized the president, because you didn't like what the president.
But on
The difference here is this. Look at, in fact, let's be as realistic as possible. Stella Nyanzi.
the Ugandan.
Yes. Why is she in jail? Because she against who?
The president.
Now tell me any other Ugandan, and we've heard the same thing in Ethiopia, in Rwanda. Tell me in Zimbabwe, you just go start writing. You can't just say stories here as much as you want to. Our creative freedom is limited.
So we're not yet ready to that level where...
It's not an issue of readiness, it's an issue.
As in I'm looking at if all Ugandans today stood up and say that we are with Stella, regardless of what happens, whether people die or not, and I'm not saying this is what should happen. Do you think that's the same thing that will, like that trend will still continue with another writer?
Well, I do honestly think that it's nothing new in my opinion. That this is something that has actually traversed the African history, since the classical eras to where we are at this point, because it's not news for writers to actually sort of go into exile or something.
But different generations. There's a freedom of speech.
And I agree with that. There is what ought to be, which is actually a liberal view of things. But there is the reality, which is actually the realist point of view. And coming from a realist point of view, from a realist place of things, I'd actually say then that it's not just Africa. It's actually even the United States. People like Edward Snowden are actually he's actually in Russia for nothing but speaking the truth. You see, the people who've actually been killed, the inventor of Pinterest, died because he told a lot of stories. In fact, what we're talking about, he wanted to free books, books that as we speak right now, there are books that the government, even the government of Kenya, they know about, but then they can't actually release in the public because it's actually the naked truth. It will actually provoke or get the society to a place of consciousness, where they get to know more about how the government operates and all that. And that's basically what actually happened over there, and that happens with every society. But what I mean to say in a nutshell is that there are risks, but again, revolutions do call for it. That's a reality.
That's true.
That's a reality. A friend of mine wrote something yesterday. He goes by the name Uzawala, and he said that every revolution is actually initiated by bloodshed and sustained by bloodshed, and that in itself goes to point to like how serious every revolution is. Yeah, so the kind of revolution that should actually come by the books, then I think should actually take the courage that will actually start with the young people. I'm actually very keen on the young people, because the generation that has gone has actually they've actually told stories from a place of cowardness, except for the few that we can actually mention. Yeah.
Okay, we spoke about freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is only freedom of
You
speech.
say it's an illusion. Is it just on paper?
Yeah,
People
so let me take it my way.
In the constitution.
It can only be freedom of speech when there is freedom to speak that truth. So I think that African writers are handicapped by the fact that if they touch on sensitive matters, they may go to jail. But the question is, will they are going to jail make the book popular or pass the message? If it cannot, if it is going to suppress the message and oppress them, then they hold back. And also, for you to write, in most cases, you must do research, you must travel, you must buy some information, maybe from sensitive sources, and that needs sponsorship. And in most cases, whoever sponsors writing, the result, the agenda must favor him. So you cannot write to favor the opposition when the government is still in place. They will finish you. So that's what makes the African writers a bit hold back. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like you said, everything is a risk that should be taken, right? Calculated risk. What do you think about the African space right now when it comes to writing? Because people are moving from the books now into the online content. Yes, is it a plus or a minus?
For one, they're cheaper.
And unregulated, unless...
And unregulated, and because of that, it means, and now your audience reach is wider. You see, traditionally, people relied on hard copy books that maybe you'd find in Nairobi, not find in Kisumu, in Kakamega, but now anyone with a phone can go online and be like, hey, Priska wrote about this, let me go and read it.
I'd be most worried, if the 5G network were already here, because then, then you'd find it that in that sort of setup, in the cyber world, then you'd have the patrons of such creation. The world is actually moving towards becoming more like Wikipedia, one that you can actually edit and you can plus and minus a few details, and that's actually the risk. But as it is, it's a plus, it's convenient for most people, but then with convenience comes a lot of inconvenience.
That's true.
And me also can concur that it is a plus, and also the writers have evolved such that they tell a story within a very short time, and the story becomes direct. It's a direct injection. So, and also due to our education systems, we find that reading is like getting back into class. It's like a jail. No one wants to grab a book and read. So with the online content, it becomes easier, especially if it's visual.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something before?
Yeah. Just if I could actually say something, I think there's actually a domain of people that might be left out that I'd love to defend. There are people, I have friends who are bookies, and the smell of a book really means a lot to them. And not just the smell of it, even carrying a real book and all that. And it's actually there are people who are ardent followers of hard copy and ardent fans. So I guess then future writers and current and present writers then should not neglect that niche.
Right.
Thank
Thank you, gentlemen, for being part of this conversation. Well, that's it for Africa and her people. Please tell us what you think. Who do you think is credible enough to write about Africa and her people? My name is Priska Aroko. Thank you so much.